Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so I'm gonna answer some of the questions that you guys saw. I did a live stream yesterday, but this time I'm going to do answering questions that many of you guys have put up for me. So let me just bring them up. Okay, so question. I'd like to understand more about why a man needs no reason to divorce his wife, whereas a woman does if she wants khula. Can you please recommend any books, literature? I don't know about any English books, but Arabic books, the books of fiqh. Yeah. So you send, so you basically look at the books of fiqh and read them, and in there they'll mention to you the reasons why the scholars have deduced how Allah has legislated divorce for a man, that he can issue a divorce, and for a woman that she can issue a khula, and the reasons for it. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know anything in English, if there's any English literature out there. Alright, next. Thank you very much for explaining in detail the issue of having institutes with unqualified teachers teaching Islamic sciences. I think you didn't touch on one point which I was specifically interested in, and that was that should we be more tolerant towards the fiqh or some aqidah mistakes they make because of the amazing success of their dawah and the fact that they have never claimed to teach people to become scholars in the first place? Sorry, I'm going back to this question again, but as I said, I've studied them myself. Okay, so like I mentioned before about this issue with regards to wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So like I mentioned before about this issue with regards to places, institutes that are not qualified to teach, and then they're teaching people. So one is where you have an institute where you have qualified people, like a madrasa or something, and they teach people, alhamdulillah, which is obviously ideal. Someone who has qualified, and the whole point of qualification is that you get something which is known as ijaza, and this ijaza is where you have permission to carry on teaching the sciences to other people. And this is something which has been in our in our system from day one, where you have to have some sort of like a license to go and teach other people, so that from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, everything that a person is teaching, there is some sort of like qualification for them, so that they're not just saying anything. Yeah, people will make mistakes, teachers will make mistakes now and again, that's fine, but at least if they have been approved of by their teachers, and then their teachers have been approved by their teachers, right? It's like getting a degree. So getting a degree would mean that the institute is happy with this person teaching the sciences or whatever. So this is why we need to have a rigorous system of testing people, checking people whether they're qualified or not. Now, if these unqualified people, if there's people who are not qualified, who just studied a bit of Arabic or studied a bit of hadith or a bit of aqidah, and they're going around teaching aqidah and teaching hadith, this is dangerous. This is because they might be saying lots of nice things in the beginning, but then when it comes to the most serious things in Islam, which they might not know are serious, and they haven't studied it properly, they could go around saying things which are very dangerous. Okay, so this is why you got to be very careful, and the Prophet ﷺ has warned about people who don't have knowledge and they answer people's queries without knowledge, and he also at the same time mentioned about people who are qualified and they make mistakes, right? That there's a difference between the two. So this is why these places that are doing very well, successful, and you can see in many kind of organizations in the world where people should stick in their lane, right? So if there is an organization and they are teaching the deen, they should teach the basics, the daruriyat of deen, and they should inform the people you do not have a right to go and teach more than this or beyond this. You're not qualified enough. They should make that clear to the people, so that they don't go around thinking that they are able to. And you see this many times where someone would have done like a crash course on something, a 1-year course, 2-year course, and all of a sudden now they're teaching tafsir, or they're teaching books of hadith, big books of hadith, or complicated masail of fiqh. So you got to be very careful of this, because this can lead to many problems, and one of them is that people will be distorting the religion. So distortion of religion is something which is, and obviously these people should be allowed to teach, but they should teach whatever they've learnt. So whatever they've learnt, if they've learnt basics of fiqh or aqeedah, they should teach that, but they shouldn't teach beyond. They should say, look, I don't know beyond this. Beyond this, go and ask someone else. Yeah, so that's basically how it should be done. Okay, so that's I can't think of anything else really besides that. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Okay, so I hope that's answered the question. Next question. In terms of what's not ghibah, there's one situation that we get confused about. If I'm hurt by someone, and no matter how much I try to, I can't forgive and forget, what would it be considered ghibah if I tell my sister or a friend about it? Okay, so if a person has been oppressed, they can tell someone else if it's going to help them. Yeah, if it's going to help them, they can tell someone else if they know that, look, this is going to help them. Maybe even like be therapeutic for them to speak about it as well. However, what they shouldn't do is go around telling everyone. So there's a person being hurt by someone, and they're going around telling every person they meet. They're telling them this person is like this, or he's like this, or she's like this, etc. So that's wrong, that is. But if it's for purposes of redeeming oneself, curing oneself of this sort of like you can say mental state that they're in at that moment, then yes, it would be possible. And if they've been hurt by someone else, then obviously they should be going and getting help from someone else. Definitely they should be. Okay, I hope that answers that question. Yeah, so next, I was always under the impression that when someone becomes baligh, even if it's your own child, then you can't force them to comply with the rules of Sharia. You can advise that's about it. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Then I'm just trying to understand, I'm not being argumentative at all. How is it for someone to say if you're going to come to my house, then you have to wear hijab? Can you please explain? Yeah, I mean, this is simple. This is, if you go to a school or university and they say to you have to wear a certain uniform, you must wear this uniform, you're not allowed in. Or you go to a certain dinner and they say you have to wear certain type of clothing, you've got to wear certain types of shoes. That's their own policy, the policy of the institute of the building, right? Or someone's house. If someone comes to my house and maybe I say to them, look, can you take your shoes off? Yeah, you can't walk around with your shoes on. It's not Islamic. I'm not saying that as an Islamic ruling. I'm just saying that because I believe in my own house, this is how it should be. This is how I prefer. So you can actually enforce in your own jurisdiction. You can enforce whatever you want, as long as you don't say that this is what Islam says that you have to do. So if you say that Islam says you have to do this, like a restaurant might say no one can drink alcohol in this restaurant, right? But you can't force someone else not to drink alcohol. That's their choice. So I think you're confusing this with issues that you're thinking that if someone says to you that you can't come into my house without hijab, you're believing it to be Islamic. So that's not necessarily true. Yeah, it might be based upon someone feeling that this is Islamic, meaning that it's rooted in an Islamic ethos. So they believe that hijab is something which is important because of Islam, and so they believe that in their own home this is what you should wear. That's fine, right? So I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just like any school, any university, if they have a uniform or a workplace, you got to wear a certain type of clothing, certain type of attire, then you can't attribute that necessarily that the religion is saying this. So I did my wudu and prayed Fajr. A few minutes after praying, I noticed I had some dirty blood and came out of my belly button. I assumed that meant my salat wasn't valid. Was it okay to just wipe it, read it? No, the salat's fine. Your wudu won't break. So wudu will only break because of blood if it comes out of a wound. So if you're 100% sure it's come out from the wound and it's moved on its own. Otherwise, if it's something which is like obscure, you can't really see where it's coming from, how it's coming out, the wudu doesn't break. Yeah. So in the belly button issue, wudu wouldn't break because of, like, if someone had an infection in their belly button and you put like some sort of tissue there or something and you dabbed it and it had some, it wouldn't break. Yeah. So the wudu totally fine. Your views on issues related to women, such as whether they can ride a bike publicly and constitute a zina, whether they can have a YouTube channel for dawah purposes. Do you think your Western upbringing has to play in it, or do you think had been living in Pakistan you would have given different answers? Environment, yeah. So basically the thing to remember here is that a lot of times people confuse culture with what's Islamically permissible. Yeah, so it's always been the case. Even if you look from the early days, even many of the fiqh fatwas that were issued, you see many of them were issued based upon the culture. So even if, for example, in Pakistan, so there'll be many things people will assume to be part of Islam, but they're not part of Islam. It's cultural. So for instance, things like, covering your head when it's azan time, or even maybe like wearing a black hijab, these kind of things. Women should maybe have businesses or something like that. I'm just saying for argument's sake. Then this obviously is a lot of it's influenced by culture. So when you're studying fiqh, when you're studying Islam, you have to separate culture from Islam. You got to understand what is Islamic, what is basically something that has been derived or has come from the Quran, the Sunnah, the ways of the Sahaba, and what things over the years have been affected by culture. And I'm not saying that all the fatwas that were affected by culture are wrong. Some of them are alright. Yeah, some of them are, very good as well. So, sometimes the scholars might perceive something in society, and they might, for example, like one of the things is men and women intermingling. So many of our societies, we have segregation between them. And if someone was to say, well, no, let's remove the segregation now, Islamically, this kind of segregation in the Prophet ﷺ mosque, they used to pray and the women at the back and the men at the front, etc. See, what happens sometimes is because a culture has been living and they've been practicing in a certain way for so long, if you all of a sudden tell them it's like this, then what happens is they actually go to another extreme of it because they don't know how to balance it. They've been living for so long in this way that they find it difficult to strike a balance. So this is why I say that sometimes the culture itself is a very good thing in many cases, because it's the automatic kind of monitoring system for the people. Yeah, it keeps them in check. It kind of, without any scholar, anyone saying anything to them, they automatically conform with what the culture is saying. And many times the culture has been positively influenced by Islam. Yeah, and you get many, for example, like you get many women in Pakistan who will cover their heads not because Islam, but because, and how can women do this and how can women do that? There's obviously limits on everything. I don't say you can get on a bike and start zooming around the world and do 80 days around the world on a bike for any woman. So I'm not saying that. So you have to understand what I say. So every time I answer a question, I might answer a question a certain way, but I'm not saying that this is unrestricted without any rules or any limits attached to it. Yeah, there will be limits attached to it. Okay. Okay, next. I think in reference to the previous question, it's better to say you're being brought up in the West, because I'm not sure if you had a very conservative upbringing while living in the West. But what I'm trying to ask is how much. Well, okay, we've done that. Many of my teachers were different. So some of them were very strict. Can you please expand a bit more on that? What if we want to just concentrate on one or two subjects? Should we study those with different teachers as well? Okay, what I meant by studying with different teachers is that overall, when you're studying, you shouldn't just study from one teacher. It's not a very good idea. You can study from one teacher, you can learn the whole of deen from one teacher, alhamdulillah. You can learn alif ba, you can learn how to read Quran, you can learn tafsir of Quran, you can learn Arabic, you can learn fiqh. That's fine, nothing's wrong with it. What I'm saying is that you should try to study from various teachers, because what happens is, if you study, like there's a famous Arabic saying, which is, when you study from someone else, then the shortcomings, the flaws of your teacher become apparent to you. All teachers have flaws. Yeah, every scholar in the world has flaws. No scholar is perfect. Every scholar's fatwa can be revised and looked at again and critiqued. That's fine. So when you study with other teachers, what you get is like a different sort of like approach to sometimes to a certain masala. So let's say, for example, you're studying an Arabic grammar from one teacher, and he's teaching you a certain way, and then you study from another teacher and he teaches you in a slightly different way, so that clicks with you. So you might not click with every teacher in every masala. So when you study from other teachers, it broadens your horizons as well. Yeah, you begin to see things in different ways, like the Sahaba. So the Sahaba, they obviously learned from the Prophet one teacher. They learned it from, because he was the perfect teacher, right? The perfect religious leader and civil leader as well. The Sahaba were obviously not like that. So different Sahaba would take from different Sahaba. Yeah, so they would learn from each other, they would benefit from each other, and they would strike a balance sometimes, knowing this. Okay, anyway, so I hope that answers that question. Yeah, so that's what it means. So if you want to study from one teacher, one subject, that's fine, totally. Study from him, that's fine. I mean, I probably studied from about between 40 to 50 teachers, yeah, in my time. And I still study from different teachers. And if you look in the past, you'll see scholars have a big list of all their teachers. Like some of the scholars, between 500 to 1,000 teachers easily they had on different subjects, right? So for various reasons, obviously, some of them maybe they couldn't complete a certain topic with one teacher and they had to do it with several teachers. Sometimes they repeated the same topic with multiple teachers, and that's totally fine. Yeah, totally fine. It just broadens your horizons by studying by other teachers. Are you planning on doing a course on Islamic history anytime soon? I don't know. I'm not too much of a history fan. I mean, I like history, but I'd have to do a lot of research on it. At the moment, I'm working on pre-Islamic history. So pre-Islamic history meaning balagha. Looking at not balagha, jahiliyyah. So looking at pre-Islamic, how the culture was, how the society was, how they used to function, what the mindsets were, what their kind of understanding was of the world around them, science, etc. So that the reason is so that when Islam comes, right, you can see how much of Islam affected their society. That's basically what I'm so make dua that gets done. Okay, can you please explain وَهَلِ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الْحُبُّ وَهَلِ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الرَّأْيِ الْحَسَنِ? So هَلِ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الْحُبُّ is an Arabic expression, which is isn't religion all about love? Yeah, هَلِ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الْحُبُّ. هَلِ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الرَّأْيِ الْحَسَنِ. Isn't deen all about good opinions? Yeah, or good position stances on things. That's what it means. I don't know what kind of context you want it explained in. Maybe I'll have to see the sentences before and after. So sometimes this is just like what we call al-hasr al-majazi, yeah, where you are making an exemption, but the exemption that you're making is with metaphorical. So it's not like Zayd. There's no strong person except Zayd. So that doesn't mean that only Zayd is a strong person. There could be others, but you're just exaggerating it. So these kind of sentences are forms of exaggeration, mubalagha, I would say. So it doesn't mean all of religion is about love, right? It doesn't mean that. Yeah, it's just exaggeration, meaning that lots of parts of the religion you can see love in there, and lots of parts of the religion you can see all of this. Okay, I think I asked this months ago but you never got around to answering them. How do you deal with difference of opinions amongst the ulama in a mature way, especially on like some mawlid, permissibility of music, eyebrows plucking? Okay, so I mean, there's twofold issue here. One is that maybe the scholars are not kind of coming together and not kind of sitting down and discussing these things, the things that they differ on. So sometimes you might see like a disconnect between scholars. So one scholar is talking about mawlid in this way, one scholar is talking about it in a negative way. So you think that they don't agree on anything, but if they sat down and they talked about the commonalities of the mawlid, you'll see that they agree on a lot of points. There's certain points they might not agree on, and likewise other masail. So I think that's the first issue. We need to get scholars to kind of sit down, discuss, not in a debate fashion, just in a discussion fashion, so that general public can appreciate that they do have certain commonalities between them. And the second is that general public need to be educated in the scope of differences of opinions in the religion, right? So people are maybe on Jummahs, maybe talks need to be given regularly. I mean, I do this a lot in my Jummah talks. I always mention a little segment on the importance of not taking differences of opinions to the nth level, and take considering it to be the main thing of religion. So yeah, so I think that's what needs to be done with all difference of opinions. Scholars need to show how much difference of opinion possibility there is, and how much they share, and also the general public need to be educated about the scope of difference of opinions. And you'll be surprised, many of the general public actually think there is no room for difference of opinions in Islam. They think there's only one way for everything, which is not the reality. Many things there's only one way, obviously, but then there's many other things where there's scope. Okay, raising the kids, whose responsibility is it? Is it the dads, mums who are ultimately responsible for both their dini and secular education? Generally, they say that the mum is responsible for bringing up, and then once they reach an age where they can understand, the father is responsible for the education. That's what they say. Can you please recommend a good book on understanding the hudud laws? Yeah, there's a few that I came across. Do you want English? Do you want Arabic? Let me know. Some people say that the woman will be rewarded for doing a housework herself, even if she cannot afford a servant. They give example of Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha, saying that she was the best of women and did all her work herself. But then if we get help with our housework, it can free us up from doing a lot of things, such as learning about deen and doing ibadah or voluntary work for the community. Can you please give your opinion? Okay, so when it comes to these kind of sayings, when people say things like, a woman will get rewarded for doing a housework and things like that, this is like a general statement for everything in life. In other words, if you're in a situation where you have no other possible way, then for you to do that thing, you get reward for it. Alright, so for example, if there's a man and he has to go for work, he does, yes, a woman, if a woman was to, let's say, in the house, the woman obviously does not necessarily, according to majority of scholars, does not necessarily have to do housework, doesn't have to cook and stuff like that. It's optional for her. She gets reward for doing it. It's a voluntary thing totally that she's getting extra reward for. And if she had a servant to help her, alhamdulillah, yeah, many people in the past, Sahaba, they had servants that would help them. The Prophet ﷺ, Aisha radiallahu anha, also had a servant as well. Yeah, so his wife Aisha radiallahu anha, she had a servant, and Barira, and she would help them in the house. She would cook as well. So it's fine. You can have them, servants, if you're wealthy enough to have them. Otherwise, if you have nothing else and you do it, this can be considered to be a means of gaining lots of reward as well. So yeah, if a person can afford servants and extra support, and other family members, they chip in and they work in the house, alhamdulillah. Okay, are you aware of any Islamic charities organizations that give mental and financial help to Muslim women who are going through abusive marriages? Yeah, I know Asufa has deals with it as well. So if you contact Asufa and you tell them, they'll probably put you through to someone. Asufa Institute. They have a department outreach project that deals with this, and I think there's some other ones as well, like Noor. I think it's Noor, Nour, something like that. They deal with it as well. They specialize in that. Islam lays great emphasis on making sure that nothing we do say hurts other people. However, there are some people who only are overly sensitive and might take something you've said to heart when that's not your intention was, or you might say something jokingly and they are offended. In this, not like a blanket statement. Shouldn't hurt someone's heart. Don't hurt Abu Jahl's heart. Don't hurt Firaun's heart. Right? It's not a very logical statement. People's hearts will be broken. People's hearts will be hurt. You'll say something, they'll get upset. Some people are oversensitive. Some people might be going through emotions, might be going through hormonal change, whatever. So they go through these kind of things. Yeah, those things in Islam which have been explicitly forbidden, like for example, backbiting, right, or slandering. These are things you're not allowed to do. So the result of those is obviously hurting someone's heart. So it's not the hurting of the heart necessarily which you've been forbidden from doing. It's actually the things that lead to that. So like backbiting, slandering, etc. All these kind of things. Those are the things Islamically you're not allowed to do, right? And obviously, mocking someone, if you're mocking them, making fun of them, then that could come under backbiting as well. It could come under slandering as well. So this is why you're not supposed to do it. But if you're just making a statement, if let's say for example an imam is giving a talk and the imam says people should stop parking on the double yellow lines outside. They're blocking traffic and then becoming a nuisance for the people. Then this kind of situation is a situation where even if the guy who parks his car on the double yellow lines, says that you hurt my heart, well, tough, bye. Well, your heart should get hurt. You're a nuisance. Okay, Rasulullah SAW ordered us to throw a handful of dust at the faces of those excessive praise. How do we understand this hadith? What does excessive mean? So this basically means in that situation where there's no benefit for that other person. So if there's no benefit for the other person and you're just overpraising him, mashallah, you're so good, mashallah, you're so excellent, mashallah, you're like this, your talks are like this, and the way you do, you drive your cars like this. If you're doing it for no reason, this is wrong. And especially if you're trying to gain something from them, then you shouldn't be doing it, because this is just gonna plant arrogance in that person's heart, right? Unintentionally, that person will just slowly have this feeling of pride in their heart. So, but sometimes you can do it if it's for a good reason, like motivating someone. Like, for example, let's say you got children and you want to say good things to them. Mashallah, you're doing very well, excellent, you're so good, mashallah, because you want to motivate them to work harder. That's fine. So if there's a reason for it, a good reason for it, then now throwing dust in the face, it's not a literal kind of thing. You pick up dust and throw in the face. It's an Arabic saying. It's an Arabic saying, and unfortunately, when we translate into English, it just sounds very strange. Like, why would you pick up dust and throw in their face? Right? It doesn't make sense. So it's not literally you pick up dust and throw in their face. It's an Arabic saying. Arabs have many sayings, like they say, may your hands be covered in dust. May your hands be tied. But they don't literally mean that. It's an Arabic saying. Okay, almost there. Where I studied before, we were taught that we can pray just one rakat of witr on its own if tired or unwell, and that would be sufficient. What's the minimum amount according to Hanafi? According to Hanafi is three rakats. You have to pray 3. According to the Hanafi fiqh, can the Khalifa or the head of state fix a minimum age of marriage for men and women based on the customs? And possibly they can. They can make it a legal rule in administration. So administration can do a lot of things. The government can do a lot of things. Just like, in this country, government, they set certain laws and rules. Government can do a lot of things. So the government kind of has these extra powers that is being given by the Sharia for doing certain things. Is there something as studying too much? How much would it be considered normal for someone to study? There's no such thing as studying too much. There's something known as wasting your time in studying certain things. There's something known as that, but there's no such thing as studying too much. Whatever you study is always going to be beneficial for you, right? However, what I would suggest to a lot of people, on a side note, when they study, they don't know the aims and objectives of studying. Like, for example, someone who studies Arabic grammar, they don't know what they're getting out of it at the end of it. Like, they think, I'm studying Arabic grammar because I want to be able to listen to Arab talks and understand what they're saying, or I want to study Arabic grammar because I want to understand Quran, or I want to study Arabic grammar because I want to know about Islam. Right? Sometimes they're two, mutually exclusive things, right? And people don't know objectives and aims in Islam. They just think something, they hear something, and they just make their own assessments of it. So what I would say is that focus on your studies, study something which you want to study, and find out from an expert, what should I be achieving when I'm studying this? If I'm studying fiqh, what's the aim? What should I be doing? Okay, so that's the thing you should do. If I'm studying Nahu, what should I be looking at in Nahu? What should I be focusing on? And there's actually a very good, there's a guy called Josh Kaufman. He's American. And he actually has this, a very good way of, how to learn something very quickly. And the khulasa summary basically is before you go into anything, always first of all do lots of research into it and find out from the experts what things you should focus most on and what things you should focus less on, so that when you're studying, you can actually study in a very rapid way. So you can Google such a praise is such a praise is objectionable and desensitizes us to sin, whereas some of us felt that that's not how we should look at literature. What the story was trying to draw our attention to was the chivalry and sense of humor of the young man, which are very noble qualities to have. His preference to rather have his arms cut off than anyone tarnish reputation. Okay, the societies in the past more permissive and tolerant to these things than now, or is it something that you find in the works of fiction? How did the ulama? Okay, so this is a very common question that people ask. The thing to remember in these kind of things is, look, see, a lot of people, when they practice Islam, when they study Islam, their vision becomes very, very fiqh orientated. So they kind of shape their whole life around legal rulings. Like, what is the legal ruling of lying down? What's the legal ruling of standing up? What's the legal ruling of opening my car with my right hand? Should I open my left hand with my right hand? Should I get into my car with my right foot, my left foot? When I walk down the street, should I walk towards the side of the wall, to the side of the road, left side, right side? Should I, when I'm buying some food, should I buy some food from a person who has a beard, who doesn't have a beard, etc.? These kind of things. So they make their life a very, you can say, they try to sanitize their life, make it very sort of like fiqh orientated. But so what they're doing is basically they're kind of expunging, removing all the kind of the culture. So when Islam was revealed, when Islam came, there was a very rich culture in the time of the Sahaba, and one of the rich culture aspects of rich culture they had was literature, poetry, all forms of literature. So this is why, if you want to understand the Quran, there is no way out of it, you must understand Arab culture. You must understand their jokes. You must understand their criticisms, their sarcasm, their novels, their love stories, their war stories, their slandering, their backbiting. You must understand all of this, how they done it, because that will immerse you in their culture. So then once you're immersed, and now you read the Quran, now you read the religion, you can make sense of how everything fits in. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ himself loved poetry, right? We know that. On many occasions he would actually ask people to read poetry to him, but obviously there were certain types of poetry which he would stay away from. Other Sahaba would listen to a broader range of poetry, you can say. So there was like a famous poet in the time of the Bani Umayyads who was known as Amr ibn Rabi'a. So Amr ibn Rabi'a, he was like a very famous for romantic poetry. He was actually one of the earliest in the time of the Umayyads. He was the earliest for romantic poetry, and a lot of Sahaba and people used to actually listen to his poetry and consider his poetry to be acceptable, even though there was lots of romance in there. And if you read, for example, Imru al-Qais, who is a pre-Islamic poet, he actually has 4 girlfriends, and he talks about them in very explicit ways. But the thing is that we're not studying it because we want to understand the mindset of that time. And in today's times, I mean, if you think about it, if you think about all the kind of Pakistani dramas, that people watch, Indian drama, Pakistani dramas, a lot of it, Indian films, a lot of it is about this love and this kind of guy and woman, and they have these problems and they want to get married and blah blah blah. So this is the culture of this time. So you guys understand this. So you must understand there would have been this kind of mentality in the early days as well, before Islam and even around the time of Islam. So you have these stories, you have these fictional stories, you can say. Layla Majnoon is actually a very famous poet, which hopefully inshallah I'm going to be covering that kind of poetry later on, maybe in the year or maybe next year, after I cover a lot of Mutanabbi. And you can see even Mutanabbi as well, he does this as well. So it's a culture, it's a literature, it's a genre, and a lot of people, because we don't read, we're not a reading society, we just want to live our lives according to the legal rulings of everything. And if we see anything which seems to be objectionable to the legal rulings, then we think that this is something which is wrong. So I hope that clears it up. So I mean, if you read lots of Urdu poetry, you can see lots of romance in there and love in there. You can see a lot of it. But what I'm saying is that you look at the classical poetry, and you look at their stories, and this is where these kind of stories come from. So the honorable man, this is where these kind of stories emanate from. Alright, I wanted to ask something in response to your answer about NS and I bonds. If my father invests in bonds and ends up earning some cash prizes and then spends money on his family. What should I do? I mean, as long as he has alternative income as well, halal income as well, then it's okay. You can consider whatever he's spending on the family to be from the halal income. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Can we give food that doesn't contain alcohol or pork in it, but it's still haram for us to eat, non-Muslims? What about the food that has pork in it? Generally, according to the Hanafis, no, you can't give anything which is haram to anyone else. Just as you can't receive it, you can't give it, irrespective of whatever it is. Anything haram, you can't even give it to animals. But according to other madhabs, there's some leniency as long as it's not pork and alcohol. There's some leniency in there, like the Malikis and others. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question. Unless you had a specific question there. Tell people. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Okay. Salam. If a person gets a foul smell around their navel, I think I answered this one. Yeah, I think this one was the navel one. So yeah, navel one doesn't break the wudu. Okay, alhamdulillah. I think all these questions are answered now. Is there any more? Let me just check. Yeah, I know you guys have asked loads of questions as well on the side. Okay, I think they're all answered. They should be. Okay, I think that's it then. Alright, so let's look at your questions now. In here, alright. If a husband wants a wife to take her hijab off, what should she do? These are kind of things she should try and reconcile it with him, speak to him about it. Obviously, it's something which, injunction, a woman should cover up in front of non-mahrams. She should talk to her husband about it, about her, how she feels about this. And if it does lead to something like where the woman doesn't want to take it off, and she shouldn't, Islamically speaking, and he wants to take it off, then she can actually ask for a khula in that case. If we have qada salah left over, should we pray tarawih or the qada salat? If we have qada salat left over, both, pray both, not just tarawih and qada. It's not like you're dying and you only got tarawih to pray or qada to pray. You can pray both. Do you think that Laylatul Qadr is tonight? I don't know. I mean, might be tonight. Can a woman who's legally but not Islamically married to a man prepare sehri iftar for the man and his family? Can a woman who's legally but not Islamically married to a man, how I don't understand, how does that work? How can someone legally be married to someone but not Islamically? If you can give me like an explanation of that. If witr is to be the last salah of the night, why do we pray 2 nawafil after witr? So witr should be the last salat of the night, this is, according to majority of scholars, this is something which is preferred. So it's preferred to make your witr the last salat. Praying nawafil, I don't pray any 2 nawafil after the witr. However, if a person wants to then, let's say, pray their witr early, and then later on, maybe before Fajr, they want to pray tahajjud, some extra rakats, then they can pray, it's fine. They don't have to repeat their witr. So majority of scholars on the opinion that you don't have to repeat your witr, and you can pray nawafil after witr, but it's more preferred, it's a preference, it's more preferred for you to have your witr at the end of the night. Now if you're praying in, let's say, congregation with the imam in Ramadan, then you obviously pray witr with the imam. Now there's no kind of way of delaying it, unless you just don't pray the witr and you pray later on. So you're gonna have to pray with the imam. So you pray with the imam, then you obviously have got a lot of time until Fajr, so you can pray nawafil. That's an excuse. A sister said to me she was fasting and started her menses at 10 a.m. and then she ate after 2 hours and took painkillers. Is that okay to do, or do you have to remain as a fasting person? She was fasting and started her menses at 10 a.m. and then she ate after 2 hours. Yes, she can eat. A woman who is in menstruation can totally eat. Totally permissible for her to eat. Yeah, nothing wrong with it. Obviously, she shouldn't stuff her face in front of her family members. Yeah, they'll get a bit hungry. But yeah, she can totally eat. There's nothing wrong with it. Don't you think that Hanafis saying missing Taraweeh is sinful? They basically have elevated it to wajib fard, which is against the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, not wanted Taraweeh to become compulsory. I don't think they say it's sinful. They say it's isa'a. Isa'a is different. Yeah, they don't say it's sinful. You won't be counted as a sinner. Yeah, so unless I haven't found it somewhere. Can we? And the reason say it's disrespect. It's like very bad thing to do because Sahaba did it, and we don't find any Sahaba not doing it. So we find in the time of the Khulafa even they all did it. So it's like they're all doing it, and all of a sudden you don't want to do it. It's like a bit strange. Can we assign a surah to a salah, like for example read Surah Yasin in Fajr every day and likewise in other surahs? Yes, you can do that, as long as you don't believe that it's more rewarding to read this in this salat. Then you can't do that, but otherwise you can. When we are reciting the Quran, is it compulsory to cover our heads? No, it's not compulsory to cover your heads. When you only have to cover your heads in front of non-mahrams and when you're praying salat. When we are on our periods, can we memorize Quran using an app on the phone? Yes, you can memorize it as long as you don't recite it. The issue is recitation on with your lips, tongue. Sheikh, where are teachers that we can go to? It depends where you live. Where do you live? I'm sure you got local teachers. Yeah, ask your imam, your local imam. There are some companies that allow you in advance to give a set amount in each of the 10 nights. Is this allowed as the intention isn't the night itself? Yeah, it'd be allowed. Because if it's a company which is like is it like some sort of charity organization where you're giving every night? Is that what it is? If it's like that, it's fine. You're making them your wakil, you're making them your agent on your behalf, and they are distributing on that particular night. So it's like it hasn't been distributed by you really until they give it to someone. Does that make sense? So okay, Riaz, salam brother, what is the best way to memorize the Holy Quran? I am not a hafiz of Quran, so I don't really know, but maybe good to ask some hafiz out there. Everyone's got their own way. I would say stick to one Quran all the time. It's one copy of the Quran. Stick to one place where you memorize, like one corner of the room or one part of the masjid, and at the same time every day just keep going over it. If you keep all these factors the same, it becomes easier to memorize. But if you keep changing Qurans, changing places to sit, then what's the iddat of a divorced woman and a widow? Why is it different? So because it's in the Quran, that's why. So when it comes to a divorced woman, the Quran says that she waits for 3 menstrual periods if she has them, and if she doesn't, then 3 months, and if she's pregnant, until the child is delivered. And as for a divorced woman, the Quran says that all divorced women, they have to wait 4 months and 10 days. Yeah, unless she's pregnant, and then until the child is delivered. So yeah, it's the Quran. Okay, alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Can you tell me, does backbiting count if you are speaking to someone who does person know the individual? If they know the person individual, if they don't know the individual, or they don't have no idea who you're talking about. Sometimes they don't know their name, but like you kind of give hints and then they figure out who they are. So if they don't know who they are, then it's not backbiting. Can women wear different colored clothes, abaya, maxi dresses, long skirts and colored hijabs if they are loose and modest, or do they have to? No, they don't have to wear black. They can wear any color they want, as long as it's modest dress, something which in that society is Islamically is considered to be acceptable. It's fine. Black is an Islamic color. There's no color that's Islamic really, in that sense. How do we wash najas from clothes? Just wash them 3 times. Yeah, if you wash them 3 times, or put it under the tap for the duration of 3 times. So you switch on the tap, you put it under the tap, and so the water comes in. That's fine. It's for a few seconds, and just squeeze it out. Totally fine. Didn't they have one main teacher like Abu Yusuf and Abu Hanifa? No, they didn't. That's because they were the famous teacher of that individual. So when you hear Abu Yusuf, you think he only knew Abu Hanifa. He didn't know anyone else. Or if you think of Ibn Qayyim had many teachers. If you study Ibn Qayyim's biographies, you'd actually find he had many teachers on various subjects. Ibn Taymiyyah had many teachers as well. Okay. Alright, if you have to pay zakat on merchandise, how do you evaluate the value of your merchandise? Is it based on the price of the merchandise? Because the price also includes value added taxes. Okay, so you have to give it at the retail price, whatever you're going to sell it at. You cannot include taxes, right? Because it's a future cost. So you can't add tax. Tax is something which is future, like you owe in the future. You don't owe it now. So yeah, it's basically no, you can't add the taxes. So it's retail price. If you haven't priced them, then you can use the wholesale price. Okay, we have a lot of lucky draw here. You buy something and enter a lucky draw and win something. Is that allowed? If you have to pay money, for that draw, then no, it wouldn't be allowed. It would be counted as gambling. But if it's free lucky draw, then it's allowed. We have an option here to buy a household item on installments. For example, if something is 1,200, you can pay 300 every month for 5 months. That makes the cost 1. Is that allowed? Yes, totally fine, as long as you agree to it at the beginning of the contract. Can women wear different colored clothes? Yes, they can. A sister asked, she started menses at 2 hours. Yeah, I think I answered that one before. Yeah. Okay, can poetry be recited in front of Kaaba if it's a dua? Yes, it can be. Jazakallah khair, all the questions answered. Thank you very much. Wa alaikum assalam, Muhammad Ashraf. I heard in your Monty class that you know how W Gara bus sounds. That made me happy. You've been to my city. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So I spent 9 years in Karachi, so I kind of know Karachi very well. I haven't been there for 9 years now, but 10 years. But yeah, most of the places in Karachi I've been to, alhamdulillah. And W Gara especially, I've been on there millions of times. Are we allowed to use a VPN to get cheaper rates? Like for Netflix, it's cheaper in Turkey than UK, so you use a VPN, act like you're in Turkey to get it cheaper. Okay, I don't know exactly how the VPN works. I'll have to look into that. So I wouldn't really know exactly how it works, and is it breaking the terms and conditions of the company? So I'll have to find out more about that. You might want to, I don't know, ask me next time. I can find out. If we accidentally broke our fast, for example, by water going down the throat when gargling, do you have to abstain from food and drink for the rest of the day because the fast is technically broken? Yes, you have to abstain. According to Hanafis, yeah, the fast is broken, so you have to abstain from, because it wasn't something legal for you to do, so you have to abstain. I have heard that Islamic mortgages offered by Islamic banks still have interest. That there is only one Islamic bank in the entire world, and everyone follows that bank. It isn't. Every bank can have their own terms and conditions. They have their own boards of scholars, and they execute the policies in different ways. So I wouldn't be able to say anything on that. It depends. If you have to look into a certain bank, find out their policies, and then you'd be able to say. So I wouldn't be able to say that. And generally, it's not fair for people to say Islamic banks are wrong or they're right until they've investigated properly. So yeah, you'll have to investigate case by case. Do you have to give fidya if you are unable to make up Ramadan because of pregnancy? You have to make up the qada. You have to make up the fast. And if you can't make up the fast because of some illnesses, chronic illness, then you give fidya. But otherwise, you just do qada. Is it okay to fast while breastfeeding? Yes, it's okay. Salam. I know witr is the... It's just preferred for, in the normal cases throughout the year, to make your witr the last prayer in the night. It's preferred. Sulaiman, Jazakallah khair, you're welcome. Banana, is kameen haram or halal? Is it a food? And others say it's not allowed because it's actually part of the insect, so it's not an excretion of the insect. Excretions of insects are allowed, but the insect itself, parts of it are not allowed. So it's something that you should avoid. So you can't say it's like absolutely haram or wrong. It's something which is, Hanafis would say is borderline makruh, tahrimi, haram, in that kind of sense. So you should avoid it. Regarding Muslims, academics doing research, producing PhDs, research papers, what are their benefits? What difference do they make society in general? Is it worthwhile to pursue? Yeah, I mean, it's very good. I mean, I don't really have time now. I have to finish. But this is a good topic to talk about. If you put this question in the comments below, not in the chat comments, in the comments below in this video, and next time, inshallah, I'll try to remember this and I'll talk a bit more about this, because I think this is a good thing to talk about. A lot of people like maybe want to go into Islamic studies or into academic studies, and they want to know what are the benefits of studying this. So that's a good question. Do we get the reward of all the transactions our wakil does for us in financial transactions? I mean, if you're near, remember, Sulaiman, it's all about niyyah, isn't it? So if your niyyah is there, Allah is the one that knows our niyyahs, and if we try our best to get extra reward on these special nights, and we're trying to do all that we can, then alhamdulillah, Allah is generous and Allah will give us the reward for it, inshallah. Okay, so Jazakallah khair. I have to finish there now. So thank you very much, guys, for everyone um, um coming today, participating, and I hope I answered all your questions. And any mistakes I make is from myself, and anything good I've said, alhamdulillah, it's from Allah. Jazakumullah khair. Remember your du'as, and hopefully I'll try to do another live stream maybe sometime in the week. Hopefully, inshallah. So get your questions ready, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.